Hey, Brian F. off stream here. I've been thinking, don't you hate it when you're fighting against Juri and she goes for the string into forward heavy punch, and when you try to whiff punish it, when you see the first hit whiff, you trade? Or even worse, when you go to whiff punish it, you end up getting counter hit entirely by that second hit, and it leads to a full combo for the Juri. And don't you also kind of hate when Aki's out here using her light punch whip to zone you out, and you don't really know what to do about it or how to get in? Or even worse, when Ryu is bulldozing you with his Hashogeki pressure, and when you try to parry it, you just whiff and get thrown? I know Daigo could have used a solution to this problem in his match against Crime at CEO this year, where he dealt with this exact Hashogeki sequence with the parry and got thrown, and look at that, he's in burnout, had to escape, and wasn't allowed to block any moves, tries to avoid any normals and gets clipped into level 3 and ends up losing this set. All of these situations do suck, but it turns out there's a common solution you can use to counter all of these techniques using drive parry, drive rush OS. So let me break down how to use this and to counter some examples. Starting with the Juri example, this one is definitely annoying to me because you're tricked by the whiff of the first hit of this forward heavy punch, and then the second hit happens a little bit later and goes a little bit further. You can see here, if I crouch here, the first hit of the forward heavy punch whiffs, and then the second one connects on a later frame. And actually the spacing, if I stand, it just whiffs entirely, right? It can be really deceptive where you see the large startup of the first hit, and then you try to whip punish it, and you can end up getting clipped, right? So I mentioned the drive parry, drive rush OS. The concept here is when these moves whiff, rather than attempting to whiff punish with just a normal, instead see them start up, attempt to parry them, and input your drive rush anyways. This is useful because, for one, if we look at the original example, if I stand here, you see how forward heavy punch just whiffs entirely. If I hold drive parry here, it actually makes your hurt box wider. Rather than having the awkward interaction where some of the hits whiff and the second hit connects and catches you off guard, you just end up absorbing both hits and regaining your drive gauge, which is preferable than just blocking, to be honest. The other benefit of this is, while you're going for this parry, think of trying to perfect parry this move and then inputting drive rush regardless. So if I hold parry here while this move is going on and I input drive rush, once you're in the parry block stun, it doesn't come out. So even though I'm mashing forward there, you see my drive rush doesn't come out. However, imagine if I walked a little bit first and I inputted the parry into drive rush. You can see now that the drive rush comes out. So the concept being here is look to perfect parry the move and input drive rush regardless and a button, and you might get a whiff punish on the move instead. And the other thing about it is there's even a chance you might end up getting a perfect parry. Getting perfect parry on this time is going to be really hard, but it doesn't matter because either I'm already parrying the move and I'm stuck there and I just block it as normal, or the move whiffs and I end up getting a whiff punish or at least pressure. Or if I time the parry during the initial hits of the move, I'll get a perfect parry. So I don't know when I go for this parry that if it's going to be blocked and activate the parry or absorption shield, or if it's going to give the drive rush, but I'm ready for both options regardless. So I just input this sequence the same way every time, and I get the punish or pressure, or I get a parry. And this solves having to think about, do I trade with the second hit or not, right? Which is just so frustrating when that happens. And the concept of when to apply this move is going to be moves that cover a lot of range, but also have a lot of recovery. This forward heavy punch from Juri, it's a great move, but it has a lot of recovery. I think it has like 20 frames there that you can see from the frame meter. Usually it's covered because it just reaches you and puts you in block stun. That's the advantage it has. But if you manage to make a whiff, you can actually usually get in at least for almost guaranteed pressure or a punish. So that's why we're applying this to this type of move. So the idea being, look for that animation, and instead of whiff punishing it with a normal, do the parry drive rush OS. It can prevent these types of things from happening in the first place, where you get counter hit and can lead to potentially really big combos, right? So getting something like this is a lot more preferable than getting counter hit on the second hit and losing your life instead. So another way you can apply this move is against a move like DJ's forward medium kick. You are incentivized to try to parry this because you want to get that perfect parry and get a big punish on it because you don't want to take the plus frames. So you're going to probably try to parry this move on reaction, should be your main goal. However, say this happens where they whiff the move entirely and you're not expecting it to whiff either, and you go for the parry. Well, in that kind of a situation, they can see this parry whiff and just walk up and punish counter throw you. However, just incorporate the drive rush. You see in this example, I'm actually not getting the punish every time. This has less recovery than Juri's forward heavy punch. It's only 16 frames. Sometimes I'll get the punish, and other times I might just get pressure. But you're generally going to get in there. Oh, see there, I got the perfect parry, so I didn't have to worry about the drive rush. You're generally going to get in time and secure plus frames, because you see with that interaction, I hit on frame 3, so I'll also counter hit any button. So you'd have to reversal super or something really fast in order to interrupt that. So definitely just a great way to get in and start your pressure regardless. And you might just get a perfect parry in the meantime. So if you just happen to get the perfect parry, that's great. Otherwise, you get in to take your turn. So I could imagine this, you know, you're kind of just ready for taking your turn right there as well. So another move where your reactions are usually prepared to do a perfect parry. So just add the drive rush on top of it in order to either get a whiff punish in case they whiff or take your turn back. It just solves that issue of whiffing the parry when they whiff, right? Doesn't that feel bad when they're actually the ones misspacing and they baited your reaction because they accidentally misspaced and you get punished for it? This solves that problem. The next example of a move you can apply this technique to is Manon's stand heavy kick. It fits that criteria of being a big move with a ton of forward range, but a lot of recovery, right? Like the thing about this move is usually it is punishable, right? It's -6, but you're usually not going to do it in range to be punished. It's usually going to be out here, and you're not going to get a punish, right? It's just not going to happen. It's just one of those moves that has a ton of range, and it's really hard to make whiff, really. It can happen, but they'd have to really mess with the spacing. So once again, it's a move where you're probably incentivized to parry, and then on the off chance that they do whiff it, you want to have that drive rush ready to go. I would try to parry this on reaction, right? And then if they happen to whiff, you get a punish. And for this move, this actually has a lot of recovery, 23 frames, more than even Juri forward heavy punch. So you can probably get a big punish. Yeah, definitely can get big punishes on this one. So you might, on the off chance, get a perfect parry, or if they whiff, you get a punish. So definitely consider employing this move, this technique against this move. In general, I feel like it makes whiff punish in this move actually a lot more feasible. So it covers both if they input the move in range, and there you go, I happen to get a perfect parry. Lucky me, right? So it just covers all your bases on reaction to seeing this move. But it also really deals with other moves besides large normals, which could include things like A.K.I's light punch whip, which I guess technically is more of a normal than a projectile. It fits the same category just to get your creative juices flowing here. You see here that's a far moving, horizontally traveling move with a lot of recovery. This has what, 26 frames on whiff? That's a lot of recovery frames. So obviously you would like to get a perfect parry on this move if you can, but the idea being you sit at max range here, and if they whiff the whip, gotta be careful about that, it does have active frames, you can get in for a punish. Now, obviously, this one is really far range, so your drive rush success rate may vary based on the character you pick. If you have a really slow drive rush with not a lot of range and slow startup, you might not be able to get a great punish here. Like, Sagat isn't the fastest. He has pretty good startup on his drive rush, but he can still get punishes here. But if you get a perfect parry here, you also get a punish. Let's see if you can get a perfect parry. There. I got a perfect parry this time. So on the perfect parry, what can Sagat get? Yeah, he can get drive rush stand medium. Oh, I can just do forward heavy kick at this range. Right, so still combo options for Sagat and punishes as well. So if you happen to get the perfect parry, just go for the punish. But otherwise, when you see it, go for the drive rush. So it's just another example. I think people wouldn't immediately think of this example of using the drive parry, drive rush OS, but really this is where I first started seeing the technique was against A.K.I's whip. So it really follows that same sort of logic. A far range, horizontally traveling move that's difficult to whiff punish, but has a lot of recovery. So you can always try to apply this logic of use the parry when you see it on reaction. If you happen to get a perfect parry, great. If not, you might just get a whiff punish. But there's one more example to this technique that also helps to hedge your bets defensively as well. So you saw how Crime A beat the brakes off of Daigo using this exact sequence whiffing the light Hashogeki with that string, throwing the drive parry, and putting Daigo in a really bad spot and capitalizing on his lack of drive gauge resources. However, if Daigo had used this technique, he might have been in a better situation because you need to pay attention to the drive gauge exchange here. So after blocking the sequence and I try to parry and I get thrown, I lose an additional bar and a half for my trouble there. I end up after full meter down to almost 3 bars. However, imagine if instead I use the drive parry drive rush OS here. I have about like 40-50% of a bar more worth of meter. You actually lose less meter. So even if I drive rush straight into their attempted grab, they see it and they throw me. A counter hit grab, first of all, does 1200 damage instead of 2040 damage, way less damage. But also, you take less drive gauge damage. So just to show again, if I hold parry here, expecting this Hashogeki to hit and I get baited, I'm down to that 3 bar threshold. But with the drive parry OS, I actually take way less damage and drive gauge damage, which is super important. Now, I'm not even attempting here to go for the actual OS into a button because potentially, yeah, I might get counter hit if they're really on point. That can happen. But if I do it early enough, if I'm more on point, I could potentially punish them instead. So in either way, the risk is lower than holding the parry and the reward is higher. Now, I don't want to say that's always the case because potentially they could alter their game plan here. And instead of going for this light Hashogeki stream, which is done on purpose, by the way, just to make sure that's clear, they purposely whiff the light Hashogeki to throw you off and make you whiff parry. That's the idea. Because you don't want to just press buttons here after the light kick, because you don't know if it's going to be a Hashogeki or not. You might just get frame trapped and potentially die there. That's the idea with this Hashogeki string. You don't know if it's going to make contact or not. And that's where the drive parry OS kind of covers both of those options. I would definitely encourage incorporating this against a lot of Ryu's Hashogeki strings. You could just end up getting a full hit or not. Now, like I mentioned before, potentially they can read that you're going for the drive parry OS, and then instead of going for a grab, they can press buttons to check you. So there is another layer to the mind game. They could potentially read your attempt to do this drive parry OS into drive rush, and instead of going for the throw, they can instead try going for their own lights. So based on this replay, it might be hard to get the exact perfect example going, but you can see if I'm a little late and they predict that I'm going to be going for this drive rush out of the parry, they can check me with buttons and potentially get a bigger punish, right? Like this could lead to a full combo conversion. Now, if you're really on point, you might just win every time, but it's hard to be on that point unless you're like predicting that they're doing the Hashogeki, for example. If you're trying to do it on reaction, you could get counter hit into a full combo and lose from it. However, this is just like a game of chicken between you two. It just keeps the layers going, because if you just hold the parry and they're pressing bigger buttons, you'll just absorb the move, right? So like it's not a guarantee. And instead of coming out of this situation down a bunch of drive gauge, once I absorb that one light, look how much my drive gauge gets replenished instead. So it can kind of protect your drive gauge in this manner as well. So at least representing this option makes it so that you're not just getting completely liquidated by Ryu's Hashogeki pressure, and you could still get guaranteed punish hits on the Hashogeki. It's still very possible, right? You just have to be on point with it. So I definitely think this is one of the options that players need to be representing against light Hashogeki, because using the light Hashogeki on purpose to whiff and bait people's parries is a really nasty technique that Ryu players are actively using, and it can actually mess you up. And maybe if Daigo used that in that tournament set against Crimea, he might have been able to turn it around and take it instead. Who knows? That's all I have for this video. I just thought this technique was interesting. It's something I'm trying to use a lot more consciously in certain matchups as well. So think about what your character can do and what moves you can use this technique against, and it might help you punish certain moves and deal with certain strategies that have been annoying you and you weren't quite sure how to handle. That's all I got for this one. Thanks for watching. Peace. Or even worse, when you go... Or even worse, when you... We'll get it. Or even worse, when you...